welcome, Alice.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Well, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. So I know you've spent a large chunk of your career in the restaurant business and marketing in the restaurant business. So I wonder if you could just tell us about the journey that brought you to Krystal. I know you actually are a boomerang. You were at Krystal and then left and then came back, but tell us a little bit about the journey to get there.
Sure. So when I graduated college, I went to Duke. I graduated with a double major in English and Women's Studies, which all parents who have kids who are going to college, I know will hate that because it's the least marketable degree that you can possibly have. But it taught me to write. It taught me about process. So out of school, I joined an automotive aftermarket company called Snap. And really, they didn't have a marketing department. So they said, why don't you stay with us until you figure out what you want to do and help us develop materials. So I drew planograms, I wrote sales proposals, I figured out what pricing should be and designed product labeling and eventually shot a commercial. So a lot of entrepreneurial roots to the experience. The company was then bought by Pennzoil Quaker State, which is now a division of Royal Dutch Shell, and they kind of acquired me at the same time. And I went to Pennzoil in Houston and got a much more traditional background in marketing. And my mentor there, a gentleman named Steve Koch, encouraged me to get my MBA, which I did. And at the tail end of it, Denny's called and said, we know you're sick of flying back and forth to Houston every week. It was a gentleman I had met at a conference, and he said, I'm starting new products marketing here at Denny's. Would love to have you come and be part of the team. So I did. We like to laugh and say that it's, we moved from engine oil to food oil, and it's all good. So I was with Denny's for 8 or 9 years, working in new products, starting in insights, working then in new products marketing. And then really all of my jobs have been different pieces of the marketing function. So I've always had calendar and cross-functional process, but at Denny's, it was about development. At Buffets, it was about advertising, messaging. And when I came to Krystal for the first time, it was about menu and product development. I left Krystal, did some consulting, and went to Tropical Smoothie Cafe, which is a wonderful concept, to develop their innovation process and product development. But after about a year and a half, new ownership here at Krystal called and said, look, it's time for you to come home. We're under new ownership. We're really putting time and energy and money into this business, and we'd like for you to come back and finish what you started.
Well, that's quite a journey, but I think it's talk about like a great way to start. Well, first of all, let's just say that when parents used to cringe, when our parents' age used to cringe when their kids said they wanted to be an English major, I think you and I both know now the value of being able to write and write well. Yeah. It applies to any profession, but particularly marketing, because being able to organize your thoughts in written form is a super crucial skill. And I think now English majors are more coveted than they ever were back in that day.
And I think they should be.
Yeah.
I tell my team all the time, they get sick of hearing it. There's nothing that can't be solved with process and communication. If you can develop a process and then you can communicate the steps to that process and then sell it in, everything runs smoothly.
100%. So I'm wondering if there's a piece of advice that you got early in your career, or maybe one that you would give to younger folks that are just starting out their career. What advice did you wish you gotten?
The thing that strikes me is that what brought me the most success early in my career and all the way until now is working to understand the needs and motivations and success metrics of the cross-functional team in which you work. So the best compliment I ever got was when I was leaving Denny's and making my rounds for the last day. The head of purchasing said, you know, you were never really a marketing person, you were a purchasing guy. And the head of IT said, you were never really a marketing person, you were an IT guy. And the finance guy said the same thing. And I take that as a great compliment, because if you can understand what those departments need and how to help them be successful, then you can draw a picture for everybody where everybody's got an in and everybody's got a win. And I think anyone starting out or anywhere in their career that does that, it benefits them and the brand for which they work.
I love that. Well, I wonder if that parlays to my next question a little, which I believe everybody has a superpower. And I'm wondering if your superpower is your ability to understand the different departments within a company and different roles, and then assimilate to the point where they think you're one of them and they feel like you're one of them. And you can tell me if that's not your superpower, if it's something else instead.
No, I think that's it, in combination with, you know, process and communication. The CFO of my current company has become my brother. And when he came in, you know, executives were all very dominant. And I was like, look, we're going to be best friends or worst enemies, and I'm fine either way, but it'll be so much more pleasurable for you if it's the former. And we took that to heart. And we spend a good part of our day together every day, really working through what each department needs and coming to the best place for the brand.
Well, and marketing and finance are sometimes at odds, because, you know, they maybe look at marketing as a cost center that's spending lots of money, maybe more money than they think you should. So it's not a bad idea to make an ally out of the person in charge of finance.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually had franchisees in a couple of weeks ago, and David and I present together. And one of the franchisees said, I feel like I'm watching a mutual admiration society. And we said, well, you are. We're both excellent judges of talent, clearly. But that relationship, having a strong relationship, understanding that we'll have different viewpoints, is critical for moving projects ahead responsibly.
So I'm curious, are there some values that you want to demonstrate as a leader, or values that you demand in your team for anybody that you would hire? There's
consistent in my career and in my family. I've said there's always, for me, only two things that aren't forgivable. One's dishonesty and one's intellectual laziness. So I like curiosity. I don't need to have everybody know the answer as soon as I ask it, but I want to see them be curious about finding it out. I want us to all be learning constantly and open about what we don't know and what we're trying to know, in a collaborative environment that really raises everybody else up. And I think when we do that and we operate as a unit, everything works better.
I love that. So how do you coach and mentor your team? How do you grow your team?
So I'm really fortunate. I have some great people on my team, and we do, I have one-on-ones, as everybody does, where we talk a little bit about the business, a little bit about where we think it's going, a little bit about what they want to accomplish, and a little bit about who they are. You know, because I think if you can't really understand how someone's professional growth, you can help somebody's professional growth without understanding where they are personally. We also have a team meeting once a week. We call it weekly wins, where we sit around a table and say, what do we think we need to accomplish this week, guys? Let's make a list. You know, these are the 10 things we're going to do. How are we going to do it? What do we need to do it? Go from there. And then we do quarterly check-ins as well for bigger projects.
Setup is, we often are working with a team of people who aren't marketers and don't always understand the value of marketing. Generally, how do you show the value or demonstrate the value of marketing to those that are non-marketing functions that maybe don't understand it so well?
You know, the cool thing about the way that marketing's developed over the past couple of decades is that it's not as soft a science as it used to be. There are real metrics that we can use. I mean, sales solves everything, but we can talk about advertising. We used to talk about advertising in terms of reach and frequency, and now we can talk about, in addition, impressions and engagement. And so when I can show a program that has connected with guests with real numbers, so it's not just Alice saying, man, this was totally cool, we should totally do it again. I could say, wow, we got 2 million impressions and the engagement rate was 8% when the average engagement rate in the industry is less than 1. So we should be really excited about this. I think that's where you start. You start with something finite that people can connect to because it's a real number, and then you build out from it.
Great. So I'm curious if there's a campaign or a program, either Krystal or in your previous lives, where you learned a great deal about that you needed to learn, either because it was a miserable flop and you need to, you got something that you needed for the future, or was a huge success that maybe you'd want to emulate again in the future?
Yeah, when I was at Denny's, near the end of my tenure at Denny's, I came up with the Build Your Own Grand Slam. And it came from a conversation about, if Grand Slam is the brand equity, what else is there? And so we tested, or we ideated and then concepted 30 different kind of Grand Slams: the meat Grand Slam, the carb Grand Slam, the Build Your Own Grand Slam. And Build Your Own, it seems obvious now, blew everything else away. And in doing the follow-up insights work with that, which was led by John Dillon, who's now their CMO, I learned so much about what's important to guests and how they approach a promotion and an offering, that we were able to sew into that concept and make it really successful. I think to this day, it's still the highest mixing promotion they've ever done.
Cool. Well, yeah, it's funny because we try to be creative and come up with things, and then the marketplace will tell you whether your ideas were good or not. They'll validate it. It sounds like this one was one where the consumer, the guest, really validated that this was something they wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. All right, so I want to wrap things up with some absolutely fun questions that don't necessarily have anything to do with marketing. I'm curious if there's a book or a quote or a movie or a band or a sports team or something that really inspires you. What about that inspires you?
There is a quote. I was reading, there's a big figure in Chinese folklore called the Monkey King. And I was reading the collected stories and folklore around him. And there's a quote that he says, and it's something like, I'll butcher it, a badly drawn horse looks like a dog, a poorly carved swan looks like a duck, meaning like it's all about execution. It doesn't matter like how great your idea is. If you've got the most beautiful horse in the world, if you don't execute it properly, you're going to end up with an ugly looking dog. And I think about that a lot, especially in our brainstorming. We all dream so big, but then we have to think about, all right, how do we put it on paper and how do we execute it?
I love that. Yeah, you're right. The execution can butcher a great idea. It's what's the other? There's another expression that's something like well executed tactic beats a poorly formed strategy any day.
Yeah,
like that. Something like that. I know I butchered that, but really it is in the execution, that where the rubber meets the road. So I'm curious, outside of your family, which is an easy answer, where do you find joy outside of work?
A number of different places. I love to read, as we've talked about. I love theater and music. We try to go out either as a couple or as a family to 2 or 3 shows a month. During COVID, I built a little porch orchard that I have been nursing. So I have a backyard orchard. I started it during COVID. I have a couple cherry trees, couple of apple trees, couple of peach trees, a lovely almond tree and an olive tree. And so I've raised them from these like tiny little things to they're all over 7 feet, and some of them are starting to fruit. And I just love it makes you feel kind of godlike, right? Like I have grown this lemon, and I just love it.
That's great. Well, I know that some fruit trees take a long time to actually bear fruit. So to be, it's a long-term commitment when you plant an orchard, you got to cultivate it over time. And with it's maybe a good analogy for other things in life that, it's like you plant seeds and hope that they'll germinate and grow. But sometimes it takes some patience and some patience and some nurturing?
I go out and talk to them. I have them all in pots so I can move them if I move. And I go out and talk to them every day. And I was just having words with the peach trees this week because I was like, you guys are not meeting expectation. I think they're each going to get like 2 peaches. I was like, look at Lemon Tree. They easily get 3 dozen lemons off of him. You guys have got to step it up.
I love that. That's hilarious. Well, I'm sure that it'll make a difference and the peach trees will start stepping up now.
We hope so.
So I'm curious if there's a brand that you really love that you've never worked on, and what is it about that brand that you really admire?
Can I pick 2?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be quick. So Taco Bell, I don't think anybody does innovation like Taco Bell does. They have like 6 pantry items and they come up with 200 different variations of them all the time. I just think they're brilliant. I think their reset was brilliant. I think that their tone voice is brilliant. I just love them. A smaller brand is Biscuitville out of North Carolina.
Love Biscuitville.
Biscuitville, they have kept themselves small. They have kept themselves really true to who they are as a brand, especially in quality. You saw in COVID, a lot of people start to cut corners here and there. Biscuitville never has. You're still going to get a big fat head biscuit made from scratch with
Country ham
ingredients. Country ham, egg and cheese is my favorite, but
yeah.
they have a fried green tomato, and they really have their pulse on what modern Southern tastes are, in a way that I think is brilliant.
I love that. Yeah. I grew up eating Biscuitville, and I remember they also had some fun marketing in the days. I remember an Elvis impersonator ad, which I won't redo here on camera, but I remember it extremely well. I'm curious if this is my last fun question. Is there a fictional story or realm that you would want to live in if you had the chance to live in a fictional realm?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would say this, but I think I would love to have been in the Harry Potter world. You know, this idea that you find out that you really are special and you can do something special and you can do magic. It's a big favorite in our house. My kids grew up with it. We're each in a different house. I'm a Ravenclaw. I just think that would be wonderful.
Well, we can do magic, Alice, and we do live in magical times. I believe that. I honestly believe that. I appreciate the time you spent with me today.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much, Joe.